What's up everyone, Pritch here bringing you a guide on everything Spear in New World. First, we'll go over basic and heavy attacks. Second, we'll go over all the weapon abilities, upgrades, and passives that can be spec'd into for both the Zoner and Impaler trait lines. And then finally, we'll cover potential builds and fun weapon combos to try out. Let's run it. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the doer of all but master of nothing, the Spear. The Spear scales off dexterity, so the more damage you want to do, the more dexterous you gotta spec. The Spear's secondary scaling is off of strength. Before we hop into the basic attacks, I want to let you guys know that the Spear I was using had a perk called Keen Speed, which granted me a 30% haste for 2 seconds on a crit and had a 10-second internal cooldown. So when you see me popping random hastes all the time in this video, this is the culprit. Your light attack is a 2 auto attack chain where first you hit him low, then you hit him high. This attack pattern has a pretty medium pace and does pretty solid damage overall. The real appeal of the Spear is its melee range. The Spear has incredible reach. It can hit targets from about 4 meters away, giving you the edge with proper spacing. These light attacks will do 100% weapon damage. Your heavy attack is a long windup into a quick one-handed thrust that knocks players back a bit. The Spear has a quick heavy where you can release for a faster animation that does 130% weapon damage, or you can charge for the full heavy and it's 165% weapon damage. Moving on to the trait line that's jam-packed with CC and dares to ask the question, what if we only cared about heavy attacks? Zoner. The first weapon ability is Javelin. Chuck your spear at something, dealing 125% weapon damage and staggering on hit. Stagger is like a mini interrupt, and this sits on a 14-second cooldown. It's the Spear's only ranged ability and feels pretty satisfying to hit, especially since your spear sticks out of the target that you hit for a couple seconds. And don't worry though, once thrown, you reach behind your back and pull another spear straight out your butt. The first upgrade is Forceful Impact. Knock your target to the ground when you hit him. This is now a form of CC and feels super satisfying to land. The second upgrade is Refreshing Precision. Headshots reduce the cooldown by 50%, putting it at 7 seconds. And this sounds simple, but man, hitting headshots is not easy. Here's my demo reel for America's worst spear player. I suck at this video game, apparently. There we go. What? I don't want to talk about it. The end. Deadly Distance is the final upgrade where you gain 2.5% DPS per meter traveled, which caps at 100%. This means that you max out DPS at 40 meters, and if you land a 40-meter spear on a moving target, honestly, you deserve a medal or a title or a server or something. The second weapon ability is Sweep. Sweep the legs and deal 75% weapon damage while knocking them down. This sits on a 9.4 second cooldown and casts out in a wide arc in whatever direction you're facing. The first upgrade is Tenacious Sweep, which gives you grit during the attack. Grit makes your character glow white and means you can't be staggered. The final upgrade is Coup de Grace. I know it's coup de grace, I just wanted to see how many people got triggered by me being American. Light attack during sweep to stab your enemy while they're knocked down for 125% weapon damage. This will complement the initial 75% damage for a total of 200% weapon damage. And let's be honest, it looks pretty friggin' sweet. The third weapon ability is Cyclone. Twirl that spear, dealing 110% weapon damage, and push back targets 3 meters while applying a 50% slow for 3 seconds. A 50% slow is currently the highest slow application in the game, so for once, I won't complain that it's only for 3 seconds because they're gonna feel this one. This sits on an 11.2 second cooldown, and I'm not entirely sure on the exact range of this ability, but I think it's gonna hit everything within 3 meters of you. If not, then it's something very close to that. The first upgrade is Invigorating Combo. Gain 25 stamina per hit, which means that if you hit 4 targets, it doesn't matter where your stamina was before, it'll be full. That said, you have so much innate stamina regen that I don't feel this is like super valuable. The final upgrade is Strong Momentum. This attack gets grit. Moving on to the passives, and first up we have the only tooltip and ability that gave me a nasty headache. Deadly Consistency. Plus 10% damage on consecutive heavy attacks against a single target, and frankly, this tooltip raised a lot of questions for me. Does the damage boost only occur on every second heavy attack? Does the damage boost stack if I keep landing heavy attacks? If it stacks, is it infinite or does it have a cap? All great questions from past Pritch, and after going through hell and back, I think I got a decent answer for you guys. While I've been talking, I've been playing you the clip of me testing this out, and if you've been looking at the numbers, you probably got it right away because it's super obvious. Okay, let me break it down for you with the added information that I found out my crit damage on Spear was roughly doing 130% of the damage I would normally do without the crit. So in other words, my crits were adding 30% damage. Okay, let's start with our base numbers. Remember, our quick heavy attack is supposed to do 130% weapon damage, and this resulted in 216 damage on the gray dummy. Our slow heavy attack is supposed to do 165% weapon damage, and this resulted in 274 damage. I want to point out that our basic attack on the gray dummy, which is supposed to do 100% weapon damage, was landing for 174 damage. And I point this out to simply show that somewhere the coefficients are already off. Because if I take 130% of 174, that's supposed to equal 226. And if I take 165% of 174, that's supposed to equal 287. A possible solution to this is the basic attack should have done 166 damage, but this isn't important. This is just to understand and clearly show that numbers are a bit off from where they should be. So with that in mind, let's look at every number I got in a row from testing the consecutive heavies. And they look like a hella weird hot mess. Almost impossible to spot the pattern. Almost. Let's make this much simpler and get rid of these stupid crit numbers. Remember, I was critting for roughly 130% damage, so we're going to divide each crit you see by 1.3 to get our normal value for these hits. Now even the pre-K dropouts can spot that we have a lot of similar numbers up here. My first hit was clearly a quick heavy. My next hit increased to 236, which is roughly the value we would get if we increased our quick heavy by 10%. Okay, so the passive worked. The next hit increased to 257, which is roughly the value we would get if we increased our quick heavy by 20%. Okay, so the passive now stacks on itself. We know that. Just when things were getting easy and starting to make sense, boom, 352. Screw you, math. In our heads, we were thinking that this was going to increase by another 10%. And it did. But it wasn't a quick heavy. It was a long heavy attack. We increased by another 10%, so in total, we're increasing by 30%, but this time, instead of taking 130% of 216, we're going to take 130% of 274, which is pretty stinking close to 352. Then, for the next 13 hits, we either slap for roughly 130% of our quick heavy, which is our 277 value, or we roughly slap for 130% of our slow heavy attack, which is our 352 value. I know the math isn't perfect. I know the numbers don't fit flawlessly. But whether they tweak or fix the numbers, I think the intention is clear here. This passive can stack 3 times for an additional 30% damage for however long you choose to spam the heavy attacks. And it doesn't matter which type of heavy attack you do, both are going to count for this passive. This is most likely going to be the most math I've ever done and will ever do for a passive that most nobody will ever use. If you caught the pattern and number quickly and knew what was going on before I explained it, huge props, because it took me a really long time to piece this all together. I promise, by the way, this was the only bad tooltip. All the rest are super easy. Deadly Reach. Gain 10% crit chance on targets over 3 meters away. I'm pretty sure your auto attack range is 4 meters, so you have a 1 meter window to flirt with this increased crit chance. Refreshing Reach. Heavy attacks reduce all cooldowns by 15%. This tree is literally just all about spamming heavy attacks. Evasive Maneuvers. After you hit something, you have 2 seconds where dodging backwards only consumes 40 stamina instead of 50. Invigorating Crits. Gain 20 stamina back on every crit. Merciless Strength. Do 25% more damage against knockdown enemies. Remember that Javelin and Sweep can both knock down and take advantage of this. And this means that Sweep's total damage after both hits will be around 231% weapon damage. Defensive Stance. Gain Fortify for 2 seconds after a heavy attack. This Fortify is a 15% damage absorption, with each new heavy resetting the timer to 2 seconds. Strong Conditioning. Gain 30% increased stamina regen when stamina is below 50%. Let's be real here. It's already stupid fast even without this buff. It's like the difference between having a full stamina bar in 3 seconds or 4 seconds. And that 1 second will rarely change your life because you can just dodge at half stamina anyways. Reserved Strength. Gain a flat 25% DPS boost at full stamina. Alright, maybe we care about the strong condition in a little bit now. Maybe that actually seems pretty strong. Alright, having a permanent 25% DPS boost is no joke here. You gain so much stamina so fast that you're going to be playing New World and having this damage boost for like 95% of your playtime in any encounter. And that concludes the zoner trait line. To recap, your heavy attacks are so juiced up that you forget you even possess light attacks. All your abilities are forms of CC or knockback. You have an incredible amount of crit and stamina regen, and your elite is an almost permanent 25% DPS boost. Alright everybody, mid-round break, and I just want to say thank you. Bottom of my heart, thank you guys. I've been receiving a lot of love and a lot of comments and a lot of kind words from you guys after my Rapier video, and I just want to say it is motivating me to continue to make really good videos and good content that's going to help you guys learn and grow along with me. And I just want to say thank you. If you want to continue supporting me, guys, you can hit the like button, you can hit the sub button, you can maybe comment down below, you can ring the bell for more alerts, whatever you guys want to do, or maybe you just want to stop by, you don't have to press it just yet, you can maybe press it on the next one. Alright, appreciate you guys, love you guys, let's get moving. Moving on to the Expedition Powerhouse trait line that's all about those condies, Impaler. The first weapon ability is Skewer. Poke your target with your spear for 125% weapon damage and apply a bleed stack that lasts for 10 seconds and does 10% weapon damage each second for a total of 100% weapon damage for 10 seconds. This all sits on a 14-second cooldown, and you do a funny little hop with it, and while the bleed stacks honestly feel pretty worthless, just wait until we get to the passives. The first upgrade is Deadly Ambush, plus 20% DPS to targets with full health, and this only applies to the strike damage, not the bleed damage. Follow through. If you crit, gain a 20% DPS boost for 10 seconds. A 20% DPS boost is no joke. I know somebody, by the way, is going to ask this because the tooltip leaves the possibility open, but no. This does not apply on any crit. It only applies if you crit with Skewer. The final upgrade is Deep Wound. Bleed duration increased to 15 seconds, totaling 150% weapon damage over 15 seconds. The second weapon ability is where the spear guarantees its spot in every expedition speed clearing group. Perforate. Do 3 quick strikes that each deal 70% weapon damage and apply rend, reducing target's damage absorption by 5% for 10 seconds. This sits on an 11.2 second cooldown, and yes, each hit applies a new stack of rend for a total of 15% rend for 10 seconds. Not bad, but we haven't even hit the upgrades yet. 2 things. Since this attack applies a new rend stack, your second and third attack each take advantage and do more overall damage, but we're going to hit the numbers after the upgrades. Second, these attacks do not count as light attacks for passive traits. Rupturing Strikes. Rend increased to 10% per hit against targets over 50% health, meaning you can apply a 30% rend with one ability for 10 seconds, and this is double the rend application that you can find on any other weapon. This upgrade will make the spears mandatory for expedition speed clears, as no other weapon can provide this value. I crunched the numbers to find the total damage value of this ability once taking into account the rend applications. I took the initial hit of 271 and divided it by 70% to find that this ability thought 100% weapon damage against Mike was around 387. Then I divided the next 2 numbers by 387 to find that your first hit does 70% weapon damage, your second hit does 77% weapon damage, and your third hit does 85% weapon damage for a grand total of 232% weapon damage. 232% weapon damage and a 10-second 30% rend application all in a second is pretty freaking hot. This ability is awesome. The final upgrade is Impactful Strikes, and this adds a stagger on the third hit as long as you land all the other hits. Stagger is a mini interrupt. The final weapon ability is Vault Kick. Do a vault jump kick, dealing 75% weapon damage and stunning for 1.5 seconds. This is on a 14-second cooldown and is taunt gem compatible, which means if you put a carnelian gem into your spear, this ability will taunt and add for 2 seconds. Yes, you heard me right. AGS gave Spear a 2-second taunt on an ability that stuns for 1.5 seconds. So yeah, enjoy your half-second taunts, you tanks. If you ignore the worst taunt in the game aspect, this ability can cover 4 or 5 meters to reach your target for a very small gap close. And a quick reminder on stuns. A target remains stunned for the full duration or until they are struck with damage. Once hit, they lose the stun and can run or hit back. The first upgrade is Relentless Blows. Get a 20% damage boost for 5 seconds when using this on targets under 50% health. You have to use this ability on a target that's already under 50% health, because if you use this ability and then it puts the target under 50%, you will not gain the damage boost. The final upgrade is Continuous Motions. Your other spear abilities get a 30% cooldown reduction when you land your kick, which is a pretty fat chunk. Onto the passives. Precise Jabs. Get a 5% crit chance on light attacks. Refreshing Jabs. Reduce all spear cooldowns by 10% on each second hit in the light attack chain. This is the attack where you hit high. Finishing Blows. Do 15% more damage versus targets under 30% health. Crippling Jabs. Your second attack in the light attack chain, the high attack, gives a 30% slow for 3 seconds to targets under 30% health. This has some PvP viability. Unerring Precision. Do 20% more damage versus enemies with Grit. Straight up, with this, I think the spear is supposed to be the counter to Hatchet players. Hatchet players get 15 seconds of grid uptime, and this is basically flipping them a fat middle finger. Also, the spear has really large reach and knockdowns, stuns, knockbacks, all of which counter Hatchet players' berserk ability. In almost no other scenario is this going to be extremely useful, except dealing with Hatchet players. But honestly, the spear is a pretty nice counter, so the stronger that Hatchet players perform in PvP, expect more and more people to turn to the spear as the counter. Aggressive Maneuvers. If you hit something with an ability within 2 seconds of dodging, reduce your cooldowns by 20%. Dodge, then ability, then dodge, then ability. Boom! 40% cooldown reduction. Dodging into weapon abilities will proc this cooldown reduction even on the ability that procced it. Exposed Wounds. Plus 15% crit chance against targets with bleed. Exacerbating Crits. Any crit extends your spear debuffs and damage over time effects by 20%. This means that if you continually back crit, you can keep your bleed and rend debuffs on a target permanently. 2 big notes here that I've found. Reapplying bleed from Skewer will not apply a second bleed stack and refresh the stacks like how a rapier would. It simply resets the bleed stack timer to 10 or 15 seconds. Reapplying Perforate does not add an additional 3 stacks of rend. It only resets the rend timers back to 10 seconds, so you're never going to be getting over 30% rend. Good try though. This leads us to the Expedition Powerhouse Elite Exploited Weakness. Gain a 10% damage boost per debuff that caps at a 30% damage bonus. This is nasty, especially since you can maintain permanent uptime on 2 Condis all by yourself with Skewer and Perforate. Unfortunately, I'm unsure if stacking Condis act as separate debuffs for this, or if they all count as one. What I'm saying is, I don't know if the 3 different rend applications by themselves would give a 30% DPS boost, or only a 10%. I'm assuming that it's only a 10% though, and it has to be a unique debuff, but I honestly can't confirm this. That finishes up the Impaler tree. To recap, you have fat Condi applications, you gain a bunch of crit chance, damage boost, and cooldown reduction, you counter dirty Hatchet players, and your elite does incredible damage modifiers and expeditions. That's every spear trait. But before we go into the builds, I just want to take a second to just kind of explain a bit of the drawback in the current design of the spear. The spear is an amazing weapon that performs very well in game, but I just want to touch on 2 things the spear does better than every other weapon: stamina uptime and crit chance. No other weapon has better stamina uptime or crit chance, but the way New World is structured, both of these boons are very undervalued. No one is concerned for their stamina recharge and uptime because you get stamina back so fast in this game. Since the base stamina regen is extremely high on every weapon, a weapon that wastes a ton of perks or upgrades on increasing that stamina doesn't feel as strong or impactful as some other bonuses. In the same light, critting is always valuable because it's just more damage. But currently, you guarantee crits by striking anything from behind, which means that crit chance increase is basically worthless, since I can just guarantee crits by positioning better in group content. Like I said, the spear is still an amazing weapon with huge potential, but I just wanted to articulate a bit why I feel like the spear can be a little undervalued, and it's simply because the things that it excels at have in-game mechanics that decrease the value of what spear is bringing to the table. My name is Pritch, and thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Alright, build time. Let's do it. As always, there are a plethora of different ways to play New World that require different builds to focus on different roles, so we're going to start with my recommendations for playing the game solo open world, then partied open world, then expeditions, then 1v1 builds, then 50v50 war builds, and then finally, the one build to rule them all for if you want to do everything, but don't want to constantly change your build like me. First up, solo open world. What the spear lacks in mobility, health regen, and cleave, it makes up for with stamina, CC, damage, and reach. I recommend bringing Javelin, Sweep, and Perforate. Javelin and Sweep will both knock adds down, allowing you to free hit with an additional 25% damage bonus from Merciless Strength. A nice combo to try out would be Javelin, straight into Perforate so that the hits land while the target's knocked down. Then, as it's getting back up, immediately go into Sweep and enjoy the huge damage bonuses from the target being knocked down and 3 Ren stacks. While all this is happening, you're going to have a flat 25% damage bonus from the Zoner Elite Reserved Strength, which will be almost permanently up due to the insane amount of stamina regen in this game. This build takes advantage of the simple truth that adds can't kill you if they're always knocked down or dead. Fun little note here, you may have noticed that we're flipping the bird in this build to all the hatchet players even though this isn't a PvP build. It's to prove a point that we really want to screw them. Nah, it's really because we want the peripherate upgrades, and in order to reach the 4th row, we need to put a point in the 3rd row. We have 3 options there, 2 of which are on abilities that we're not going to use, and 1 is the middle finger to the hatchet players. So, unerring precision it is. This build is utilizing spear as your main weapon of use, but I know most people preferred using the spear as secondary weapons, especially as the disengage weapon to pair with ranged weapons, and if you want to do that playstyle, feel free to ditch peripherate for the stun on Vault Kick or the knockback and slow on Cyclone. Both can feel very good and valuable. Let's talk about fun weapon pairings. As I said before, the spear has great disengage and CC, so it pairs really well with ranged weapons that also utilize dexterity. This makes the bow and musket excellent choices. The bow is the extremely high single target DPS machine, especially if you learn to land headshots and crack skulls. The musket is the all-around easier ranged weapon and does less damage but is more reliable as you don't have to lead your shots or have drawback times. Use range to whittle adds down, then finish them off with spear. Another option is the spear has secondary scaling on strength, so you could run a full strength build and pair together with either the Great Axe or the Warhammer. The Great Axe has incredible AoE cleave and lifesteal, which the spear can set up with CC beforehand to get targets knocked down and low. The Great Axe also has really nice mobility, which is another area lacking in spear. The Warhammer plus spear combo is possibly the funniest build in New World. Both weapons are CC powerhouses, and when used together, you can chain CC and add with 6 different knockdowns or stuns. I don't think it's an incredibly strong build, but I think it's super funny to see and can be pretty satisfying because remember, adds can't kill you if they're knocked down or dead. Finally, since the spear has no sustain, another option would be to slot a life staff in secondary and just keep yourself topped off at all times. This will make you much less reliant on dodging and blocking perfectly, or using consumables like food and potions to keep your health topped off. Next up, Partied Open World. Now you got a couple friends and you're roaming around to turn them together. Your role will be DPS, but also providing a bit of CC to keep adds on the ground, giving your teammates easy targets to hit. I'm recommending the same abilities, but instead of running the Zoner Elite, swapping over to the Impaler Elite. With teammates providing a plethora of debuffs, there's a very solid chance that most of the adds you attack will have 2 or 3 debuffs on them, so you can take advantage of that 30% DPS boost. Also, screw you hatchet players. If there's going to be one takeaway from this entire video about Spear, I want it to be screw you hatchet players. Remember that we need 10 points in this straight line before we can access the elite, so that's why we're bringing every Impaler passive other than Exposed Wounds, as I figured that this would get the least value since we aren't using Skewer. For weapon pairings, the bow and musket still work wonderfully, and if you choose to use those primarily, you're likely going to get more value out of Vault Kick or Cyclone over Perforate. Use the ranged weapons to take adds down from afar, then use Spear if any adds get past the tanks to you. The same strength weapon pairings will also work very well, and this playstyle will be more of a zoner ad controller with a secondary and also just doing good damage. The Great Axe is excellent at grouping adds together and cleaving down, while the Warhammer Spear CC spam is actually crazy strong and makes your allies' lives really easy and simple while they pound down on adds that just can't stay on their feet long enough to plead for their lives. Next, we have Expeditions, which are 5-man instance dungeons. and I legit believe the spear is crazy OP here as a DPS role. I'm not going to beat around the bush. The ability to apply a permanently sustained 30% rend is unmatched by any weapon. The best some other weapons can provide is a 15% rend, which is literally half the value and harder to upkeep. On top of a permanent 30% rend, you will also have a permanent 50% damage increase in boss fights, and it only comes from 2 abilities. First, your Impaler Elite, which gives you a flat 30% damage boost when hitting a target with 3 debuffs. Every boss will have this because you're going to be applying 2 of them yourself, and I promise you, your allies will be applying at least 1 between the 4 of them. Second, the Skewer second upgrade, Follow Through, which gives you a 10-second 20% DPS boost when you crit, which is always going to be happening because you're on the boss's backside for permanent crits. Also, since you're rocking so much cooldown reduction, Skewer will come off cooldown before the Empower runs off, which means that you're going to be reapplying the Empower before it can ever fall off. So yes, nothing else considered, you're going to have a 50% DPS boost and apply a 30% armor shred. Guys, don't sleep on the spear. It can slap in expeditions, and I promise you, it's going to be mandatory for speedruns. Alright, so what do we pair with this monster expedition weapon? If your goal was nothing but damage, you could rock the other dexterity melee weapon, the Rapier. The Rapier has incredible single target DPS and might be the highest single target DPS in the game. In expeditions, there isn't enough room for 3 melee players to back crit on a boss, so one of the 3 needs to play ranged. This could be you if you decide to bring bow or musket. Just make sure to hit as many headshots as humanly possible. The bow will do more damage, but if you struggle with aiming, the musket will still work just fine and be a lot easier. Alright, PvE done. Let's get into the PvP side of things with our 1v1 build. Here, we plan on utilizing the spear's extensive CC chain potential. No matter which ability you start with, once you land the first ability, you're chaining CC one after the other for a nice combo of damage that enemies just can do nothing about. If possible, I would try to use Vault Kick as the final ability in the combo, then quickly weapon swap to your secondary and take advantage of the stun. This can lead to some deadly combos. Even though you're going to be dodging a lot more in 1v1s, you're still going to be able to take advantage of reserve strength way more than exploited weakness, especially since your stamina regen is going to be insane with a full stamina spec. Also, screw you hatchet players. For weapon pairings, the 3 dexterity weapons come highly recommended. The bow is an incredible ranged DPS, and if you can land shots, people won't be able to handle your ranged presence, so they're going to gap close to you, and once they do, you can quickly dispatch them with a full spear combo. Also, you can look to line up a rapid shot, splinter shot, or poison shot off a Vault Kick stun. The musket is the other incredible ranged DPS weapon and tends to be much easier to use in PvP situations. This will have the exact same playstyle as bow, but this time you can look to line up a trap into shooter stance, then unload headshots on the poor immobilized foe. Finally, the Rapier is the premier dueling weapon, with the highest potential and skill cap, and it also scales off dexterity, so you can use the spear as a big CC combo, then once you blow your cooldowns, swap right over to the Rapier and continue the onslaught. The Rapier has a dash and a good amount of haste for gap closing to enemies, which is a strong complement for the non-mobility found in spear. Finally, a strength build with the Great Axe is also extremely powerful. Great Axe is the premier chase and lockdown weapon in New World, so let the Great Axe make up the distance, then unload a full CC combo on whoever is caught in that gravity well. For all my Warhammer users, Spear is basically the faster, less damage version of the Warhammer, so the abilities actually tend to hit people, which leads to much easier CC chains in PvP. Next, we have our 50v50 wars. Here, in the utter chaos, Spear players actually excel with Warhammer players in pushing enemies off of points with Cyclone. If you run the Spear as a primary, I'd recommend being a part of the front lines, quite literally pushing enemies off capture points and then locking them down with your CC for your team to take advantage of. You aren't going to be there for your huge damage or combos, but you will be the setup for locking enemies down and getting them off of points. Since it's a chaotic war, most enemies will probably have a few debuffs on them from your allies, so you'll want to take advantage of exploited weaknesses here. Channel your inner Jackie Chan here by vault kicking in, then sweep the legs, then cyclone them out, and then finish it up with a screw you to hatchet players. For weapon pairings, you have different pairings for different roles here. If you're in the front lines holding points or pushing enemies off points, you're going to probably want to run this with a sword and shield or a warhammer to help knock enemies off points or hold ground with the sword and shield. If you want to primarily play ranged and pick off enemies using turrets, then you're going to want to rock the bow or a musket. Both accomplish the same goal, so it's really dealer's choice on which feels better for you. Keep the spear in as your back pocket for when enemy roamers come to your backline to disrupt you, then pull it out, knock him to the ground. Finally, if you yourself want to play a backline roamer, you could always pair with the rapier or a great axe for good mobility and dueling potentials. The great axe will be a better suited weapon for grouping enemies together and initiating, while the rapier will be better suited for 1v1 and 2v2 duels found on the battlefield. Last but not least, you're like me. You love New World and want to experience the entire game and all that it has to offer. But you don't want to constantly change your build around, and most importantly, you're sick and tired of the hatchet hype. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the one build to rule them all. Take advantage of the great knockdown potential in the zoner tree, and chain abilities together for amazing combos. Whether in PvE or PvP, enemies can't dodge your perforate if they're on the ground. And whether you're alone or in a party, who doesn't love a flat 25% DPS boost at all times? Because again, stamina regen in this game is crazy strong. So even if you're dodging all over the place, you're still going to have a huge uptime on reserved strength. Utilize the strong melee range and zone control in spear to outtrade any opponent, especially hatchet players. Screw them. For weapon pairings, I gotta recommend the bow or the musket. If you can learn to hit headshots with the bow and get really good at it, it's the perfect weapon to pair so that when enemies get close, you can literally put them in the ground or knock them away while continuing to harry them with arrows. If bow is a tad frustrating to play or you enjoy the feel of musket more, it works equally as well for the exact same reasons, except this time you're going to be harrying enemies with bullets. A couple hits from either weapon, then an ability or two from the spear, and ads will be dead at your feet before they have a chance to hit you. That's going to wrap up the spear, everyone. Huge shout out to my brother Mike for letting me stab him over and over and over again. And I hope you guys are ready to go out there and just start murdering those hatchet players with your spear. Alright, love you guys, appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Also, I'm a dirty hatchet player.